Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm really excited to welcome back to the show tonight Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt, who's a clinical sexologist, a registered psychotherapist, certified trauma and sex addiction therapist, a TV host, media personality, author. We had a fascinating conversation last week about sex addiction, and she's back tonight to talk about gender differences. Dr. Rosenblatt, thank you so much for joining us. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. And it's Rebecca.
Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. So you wanted to talk about gender differences, and you said that the male and female brains are constructed quite differently, leading to various gender differences. And if we don't understand those when we address each other, then we're speaking two different languages. And then you wanted to tell me about the top 10 differences, which apply to most but not all people. Tell me, why do you think we're actually different? You really think we have different brains?
Yes, we do. In many respects, it's the old hunter and gatherer brain. So the hunter can't be that emotional. Hunter needs to be more focused, otherwise it could cost them their life. But the gatherer is responsible for home and hearth, making sure everybody's okay. So their focuses are very different. And as we talk about the differences, we'll talk about what that looks like. But the interesting thing is, I see people from all ethnicities, different SES, a level of education, religion, etc. But the guys are a lot more alike to each other, and women are a lot more alike to each other than even finding some kind of a cultural similarity. So clearly the nature part in that respect overrides the nurture part.
And so you think this is just part of our DNA. It's part of our genetic makeup. It's not something that we're socialized into being different.
I think it's partly, how we've developed, evolutionary speaking, and just what was necessary for the survival brain, because we have the three brains. We have the survival brain, or the reptilian brain, that's responsible for keeping us alive. So, breathing, digestion, safety, and then there's the emotional brain. So it's sort of think of the brain like this. This is the basic brain, the survival brain. This is the emotional brain, the amygdala, and this is the neocortex, the logical, the reasoning brain. The order is, when this is activated, this and this stands down. When this and this are activated, this stands down. And there's actually functional MRI studies that show that if we are triggered, we're in survival mode or emotionally triggered, this part is really blue in all the scans. So it's not even alert at that point.
So we have three different brains, but only one of them can operate at a time?
Not necessarily. The order, they can work together, but if this one is in urgent mode, it is going to override. And if this one is really triggered, it's going to override what's above it. So, for instance, when people are fighting or talking to someone, having a passionate discussion, that person may be sitting here or here, and you're talking here, and you're saying, why can't you be logical?
They don't want to be logical. They want to be emotional.
That's right. Emotions are very logical in a way.
So you say that you've got these differences, and we need to understand these differences because we are effectively speaking two different languages. And you go through 10. And the first one is why we communicate. So you think that people communicate, women and men communicate for different reasons.
Yes, women believe in, and again, I want to say that not everybody follows these things, but for the most part, women believe in rapport talk, men in report talk. So what that means is women will chat just to kind of get along, communicate, connect, whereas men will talk to convey information. So a lot of times a female could be thinking out loud, or she could be chatting and sharing with her male partner, and he's thinking that she wants his advice because she has something specific to report and she wants his input into it. And he'll start to do that. And she can become really frustrated and say, I didn't ask you for your opinion or a solution. I was just trying to vent. I was just trying to connect with you, tell you about my day.
Why didn't you talk? Why did you talk to me about it if you didn't want to hear what my opinion was?
Because I was trying to have rapport. I was trying to connect with you, Brad.
So the difference is report, RAPPORT, which is what females do, you say, versus report, REPORT, which is what men do. Men do to provide information, women do to chat.
Yeah, to connect. I mean, they can provide information too, but the communication is mostly about connection. And if you think hunters and gatherers, the gatherers better be chit-chatting and connecting with each other. It would get really boring when the hunter is out there. And a hunter can't spend too much time chit-chatting in the jungle. Of course, we're very evolved, but when we're in that place where we're kind of afraid, it signals that, okay, this is not a good time to talk, dude.
You know, I coached my kids in soccer and hockey, and I was a coach of my two older kids were boys for numerous years. And then I think when my daughter was 13 or 14, she said, "Well, you've coached the guys for so long; it's time to coach the girls." Let me tell you, coaching girls soccer was a whole incredibly new experience. And you know how you start the practice or the game before the game with calisthenics, and I would be frustrated that these young ladies wouldn't pay attention to the calisthenics. They would be wanting to chat and not get into the game and not be focused and not do the jumping jacks and things like this. And one of the moms who was very involved in sports took me aside and said, don't force it. Just let them have that warm up time to make the connections, and then they'll perform for you. And so I stopped, trying to tell them to be quiet and focus and stuff like this. And we'd end up, getting together, and we'd still do the calisthenics, but during the calisthenic time, they could talk all they wanted and communicate. And it was fascinating because once the game started and they had that time to chat, they were just as interested in competing and winning as the guys were, but they needed that time before the game started to connect. And the guys never did that.
Because that's them being a team, really connected with each other. That's part of being a team for the female brain.
Fascinating. And then you say we communicate differently and that females use twice as many words as men. Really?
Yes, females use, you haven't noticed, females use twice as many words as men, and men have half the attention span. So it can create a lot of conflict from boardrooms to bedrooms. It can create a lot of conflict because quite often, the guy's just kind of lost and saying, what? Okay, you lost me at such and such. And it can feel very hurtful and insulting to the female because she's just communicating the way she always communicates. And this is why a lot of times people will say, I'd rather talk to my girlfriend. You don't understand. You don't want to listen. You're not paying attention. You're not engaged. I'd rather talk to my girlfriends. And I've actually had in my practice, a lot of husbands say, why don't you do that, honey? That's why they make girlfriends.
Or we should just say, why don't you think about what you want to say and say it in half the words because we got half as much attention span.
That's when you sit at the edge of your seat dying to say something, or you say, what's wrong? Nothing. It's an all or nothing thing, Brian.
So, well, this is interesting. So, should we just be telling our girlfriends or wives or whatever to chat with girlfriends and not bother trying to communicate with us?
I'm not getting behind that because that could come across as very contentious. But for the females who are listening, they might want to consider that.
Okay. And then the third thing you say is what we communicate about is very different.
Right. Again, women being, the emotional gatekeepers of the relationships, they like to talk about feelings, how everybody's doing, what's going on in people's relationships. Guys are more talking about sports and performance and fixing things. There've been many times where I've seen a guy go, "Oh my God," and you're thinking somebody's died, and it's just their team didn't do as well as they thought they would do, because the focus is very much action oriented. And I have a cute story for you. Somebody I was dating one point, my husband and him were really, really good friends. It was my husband's best friend. They would go.
Hold it. You were dating your husband's best friend?
I was dating him, and then he became my husband. But he met this person while we were dating. I realized that, and I'm glad you caught it because I was thinking, oh, that didn't come out right. Anyways, so they were
talking about relationships and feelings, and I wanted to understand the facts here.
There you go. And I was long-winded. I covered the entire history from dating to being married. So they were like the best of friends. And his girlfriend was somebody, and yes, girlfriend, it wasn't wife. She was somebody who I sort of basically barely knew, when you go out to dinner together. Now, I knew that they were having trouble. I knew everything about their relationship. So they go golfing. He's gone for, 8 hours, driving out there together, 6 hours of golf, and then beers after, whatnot. So I say, well, how is so-and-so, how are they doing in their relationship? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, how are they doing? And he goes, well, I don't know. I said, how can you not know? You spent all these hours. He says, I never asked. I said, and it didn't come up? He says, of course it didn't come up. Why would it come up? And I'm thinking, how is this humanly possible? You spent all these hours. And I've actually had women say, I don't think he went golfing because he was with so-and-so and he didn't know any of this. So I don't think he went golfing, but he could very well have gone golfing.
So you're saying guys can spend 8 hours golfing or doing whatever and just talk about sports and business and facts and a whole bunch of other things, and never talk about how their relationship is. And girls, ladies in that similar kind of situation, they would be talking about whatever their relationship is.
Very much so. I mean, I can be in a grocery store lineup where I'm stuck for a long time, and I'm accused of knowing the person's entire life history by the time I get to the cashier.
Is that because females ask more penetrating questions, or because females are more open and are willing to respond and just tell their life stories?
It's a little bit of both. Like, it can be how you're connecting. It could be that you feel this person is safe, this person is warm. And as soon as there's an opportunity, then a female will talk. And it's also asking questions. I would ask somebody, let's say they're with their toddler, I would ask them, how old are they, this and that, and we're on a roll from there. A man will probably read the headlines on the Inquirer and say, how strange is that? And I'll try to have a conversation with the person in front of them.
We're chatting tonight with Rebecca Rosenblatt. She's a clinical sexologist. She's an expert on couples counseling and relationships. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back more in just 2 minutes on the differences between men and women, according to Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt. She is a clinical sexologist. She's a therapist. She's a coach. She just seems to know a lot about a lot of things. We had a really fascinating chat last week about sex addiction, which was really quite an interesting conversation. And today we're talking about the differences between the genders, between men and women. And she says there's 10 major differences between men and women. The first is why we communicate. The second is how we communicate. The third is what we communicate about. And number 4, Rebecca, is how directly we communicate. What do you mean by that? How directly we communicate?
So men, this kind of ties into how many words we use. Men speak very directly. Women slip a lot of information politely in between the lines. So when I do couples counseling, this really brings things to a head very quickly. So because she's slipping things in between the lines, she thinks he's got something there too. And she's reading between his lines, but there's absolutely zero in there.
Nothing there.
He's direct. If he has to tell you, he'll tell you. And so she's interjecting.
What do you mean by that? What did you mean by that?
There you go. So she will kind of put things in there that are based in her own narrative and have nothing to do with what he might be thinking or feeling in the moment. And in the other direction, she has let him know what she'd like to do, maybe. And he hasn't picked that up because it's been slipped in between the lines. And women also tend to, they don't feel, sometimes they feel that if they're going to ask you to do something, they have to explain why. So again, they get sometimes long-winded. And again, all of this doesn't apply to everybody. So let's say, you needed me to pick up your shirt from the dry cleaners. You say, would you mind picking up my shirt from the dry cleaners? Because I won't have a chance to pick it up. End of discussion. If I wanted you to pick up my shirt from the dry cleaners, I might say, well, you know what? I have to pick up the kids and I have to pick up this parcel and I have to do this and I have to do that and I'll give you a list of 10 things. Therefore, I won't be able to get to the dry cleaners in time. They might be closed by the time I get there. So would you mind picking it up? And you might say, well, why don't you just ask me to pick it up? I'll pick it up. So it just sometimes.
Nope. It's worse than that. It's worse than that. That last clause that you added, a typical female won't add. She will say exactly what you said before, which is, I've got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, got to do that, and I've got to, pick up the clothes from the dry cleaner as well. Period.
Yes, that can often be the case.
She won't say, will you pick them up? She won't ask the question because she's expecting you to know that she then wants you to offer to pick up. And if she asks, it's not as good as if you offer. And you're sitting there going, okay, that's a lot to do. But
you nailed it.
She'd only said, could you pick them up? You said, sure, of course.
And it's also, would you like to do such and such, honey? Not really. The message is, I'd like us to do such and such.
So what's the lesson here? Is that it's that females should be more direct and say what they really want, or men have got to become smarter in diagnosing what was the actual message in that paragraph that was just said?
Well, let me ask you, which one seems less complicated?
Females should just ask what they want and tell them.
Yeah, it's perfectly okay. Ask what you need. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. It's better to just ask. Feel good about asking. It's okay. The guy will more than likely want to do that for you. It's very simple. And it's also, how in Jerry Maguire, you had me at such and such. Well, you lost me at such and such is what a typical male would say.
You had me at hello. And then what drives us is number 5.
So basically, men are goal-oriented, women are process-oriented. So a guy will not attempt something unless A, there's a goal, and B, there's a good shot at, succeeding at the goal. Whereas women will just try just for the process of trying. And this comes up when couples fight, for instance. So, when you're going round 2 and round 3, et cetera, at some point the male's going to say, I don't see the point of this. This is not going anywhere. We're looping and there's no goal, there's no purpose. I definitely don't have a chance of winning this one. So they'll just want to pause it. And the woman at that point can feel very hurt. We have a misunderstanding. What do you mean you're pausing it? Is it not impacting you? She may follow him from room to room to room to room, wondering, why are we not doing this? Do you not care? He could care very deeply.
Repeating the same thing that we've been talking about for the last half hour.
I know, and we'll continue to talk unless you get it. And the misunderstanding.
I got it the first time you said it.
Well, we wouldn't be talking still if I thought you got it.
Oh,
right?
I got it. Believe me, I got it.
But he can be hurting. He could be upset. But usually what happens is, okay, so this is not happening. I got to make such and such phone call. He's on the phone. He's on his computer, on his iPad, whatever. And she's like, oh my God, we had this huge argument and he just business as usual. He's yucking it up. He's laughing with a colleague. And here I am, I'm bleeding all over the place from being so hurt.
And so again, what's the answer there? Is that that females have got to become more goal-oriented, or men just have to understand that there's a process that you have to go through before you can get to the goal?
Here, the onus I'd say, out of fairness, would be on the male. So just to understand, and the best thing to do in that point is keep going. Round 2 and 3 is not going to help. After 20 minutes, we're going to loop no matter what, and everything else comes in, whether it connects or not. So the best thing is to call a timeout, which should be at least 2 hours and ideally not more than 24 hours, but you have to park it somewhere. When people say, okay, we're not getting anywhere, we'll talk another time, not going to happen because the female brain hasn't parked it anywhere yet. And she might be
saying we got to park it. We got after 20 minutes, we got to park it
in a specific spot. So what that looks like is, okay, you know what? I think we need a little bit of a timeout, and let's just kind of cooler brains will prevail. How about we talk about after dinner, or how about we talk about it over coffee tomorrow morning, etc. But once you park it, the brain can literally put it there and not have to worry about it. This is why people who worry, I tell them, take 15 minutes every night, make yourself go crazy, worry like crazy. And when that timer goes off, say, okay, I'll come back to it tomorrow. Otherwise, the brain doesn't know when to shut it off. It keeps going, goes all night long.
My father, before my marriage, said one of the secrets was never go to bed mad. And so you had to park it, but you had to do something such that you ended up reaffirming the positivity in your relationship. So can you park it overnight, or do you have to actually, do something to be happy again?
It's good to park it. You can still be happy. You can still connect. There's no reason the two aren't mutually exclusive. But at least you know that, sorry, we got kind of out of hand. Let's talk tomorrow. You know I love you, or something like that. You don't want to have an all-nighter, because when you do that, or late at night, because it's whether it's all night or not, the guy may fall asleep because he has to get up early, but the female is going to stay up all night thinking about it. Again, not all females, but that's how it generally plays out.
Number 6 is how we focus.
This is an interesting one. So the female brain has lots and lots of connections across the 2 hemispheres, and the neurons have very long reach. So female brain is programmed for multitasking, being process-oriented. She can do 10 things at once. Male brain is very much for created to focus. So not as many connections, and the neurons have a shorter reach. So men tend to be a lot better at focusing. And again, if you're thinking hunter, he better be focused. It could cost him his life. So it looks very, very different. So like, for instance, in the bedroom, the woman will need time to park those 10 things, but she could be thinking about all these things she has to do, and it'll take her a while to get into the mood. Whereas the guy's thinking, okay, it's time to be intimate. Let's be intimate. He's not thinking about the laundry and the lunches and the meeting tomorrow. He's there. He's present. And she looks distracted. So it's just being mindful of the fact that he's there. And he has to be mindful of the fact that she may have 10 things going on at once. And that's why there's this saying that women are like, those slow cookers. Takes a while to heat up, but once they heat up, they stay warm for quite a while. Men are more like microwaves. You can heat them very quickly, but if nothing's happening, it can cool down very quickly.
Turns off right away.
So, there you go.
Yeah, my ex-wife used to get really mad at me when I was reading or doing work on the computer or something like that. I wouldn't hear her if she asked for something or talked to me or something like that, because I was focused on what I was reading. So I could be sitting in the chair in my living room reading a book, and she would come in and say something, and I did not hear her. And she would get mad and say I'm just blocking her out or something like this. But I really was focused in reading and focused on what I was reading or working on. Is that fair?
Yes. And that one of the points in there, that's exactly what it talks about. So when a guy's concentrating, 90% of his brain is concentrating on that and that alone. And this means reading a book or watching sports, armchair coaching, any of that, 90% of it. And if he's relaxing, then pretty much 97% is turned off. But with females, even when women are relaxing, 97% of the brain stays on. So she's probably thinking, okay, Brian, you can read and you can still talk to me and have this major discussion with me, and it should be okay. I can do it. Why can't you do it? And you're thinking, I didn't even hear you. I'm so engrossed in my book. And this is, again, a common argument that comes up when I'm doing couple work. And women can often assume that you would rather be doing that instead of thinking you're not even aware of what she wants to do. So women will say he would rather come to bed and read than cuddle up. He would rather be sitting on his computer and working instead of hanging out with me. It's not a rather, it's just he needs to focus, because that's how his brain is.
So what's the solution there? Is it that men need to try to multitask, or that females just need to understand that no, the guy is focused, and so therefore wait for a break in the action, you have to interrupt. He's not going to hear you if you just sort of are saying it in the background.
And I would suggest don't interrupt while he's watching a sporting event. That just would not be cool, because that would not give you the reaction you're hoping for. But at the end of the day, it's basically being mindful of how the other gender focuses, and that if he's into something, he's into that. He's not ignoring you. Don't take it personally. And if you need to talk to him, like, do you have a minute? Is this a good time to talk? And he will be present. But think of how beautiful it is that when he switches over to you,
he's 100% focused
on you. Yeah. He's not thinking about 10 other things.
Okay, so talk about in the bedroom and being intimate. And if 97% of the female brain is on what she's got to do tomorrow and what's going on and blah, 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 how can you have a wonderful relationship?
Well, it's important for the woman to feel nurtured, because as soon as she feels nurtured, that mommy brain turns off. So I'll say to guys, you know what? take her, if she's in a shower, take her robe, put it in the dryer, nice warm robe, wrap it around her. I mean, come on, you melt in his arms, you melt in the robe, or just play with her hair, do something nurturing, because that allows her to switch gears. Or it might take a little bit longer. The warm up might take a little bit longer, and you want her on the same wavelength. So send a few cute little texts through the day so she knows that you're thinking about her and you're desiring her. And at the end of the day, she's sort of, it doesn't come as a shock. Otherwise, this is where women go, huh? Just like the guy who says, huh? It's like, okay, like I just did my chores and I just did this and that. And I'm touched out because the toddlers have been touching me all day. And now you want a piece of me too? But if you have led up to it, it's quite delightful knowing that you're being desired, you're being thought of. So that's a good way around it.
Okay, so I'm multitasking now. I got to come back and ask you, you were dating your husband's best friend? Explain that again.
No, I wasn't dating his best friend. No. I was saying the man I was dating, because this event took place when I was dating him. I was not dating his best friend. And then he became my husband. So I thought, well, I should refer to him as my husband as opposed to the guy I was dating, because I, wanted to clarify. But no, at no point was I dating his friend.
Okay. I'm glad we got that straightened out. We're chatting tonight with Rebecca Rosenblatt. She is a clinical sexologist. She's a registered psychotherapist. She's a certified trauma and sex addiction therapist, a TV host, a media personality, and an author. What's the book that you're an author of?
There's various books. There's one on overcoming betrayal. There's one, Sexual Power. And this basically gives women a chance to own their sexuality instead of being embarrassed about it. And there's another one coming in October on awakening the sensual goddess within, and like making peace with the body, feeling good about the self, no body shaming, being sensual and not being afraid of it. So it's a little bit different. It's not based in power. It's based in more interesting, saucy stuff.
Really fascinating. Owning your sexual power, I think it'll be interesting to chat about at some point in time. I interviewed a fascinating professor from London, England, who wrote a book called Erotic Capital. And it was all about the erotic capital that primarily females had, and that how that they could and should use it and not be embarrassed by it. And that too much of the patriarchy had tried to dampen down females' ability to actually use that sexual power. Because men were weak need around it. Anyway, we're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Rebecca Rosenblatt, Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt, and we're going to continue on with the last 4 of the reasons why men and women are different and have got very different brains. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're having an interesting conversation tonight with Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt, who has more letters after her name than almost anyone I've ever met. She's a PhD, an RPS, CSAT, a CST, an EMDR trained Heavening Techniques practitioner, a CLC. She is a clinical sexologist, a registered psychotherapist, a certified trauma and sex addiction therapist, a TV host, a media personality, and an author. She's got a website called www.talkwithrebecca.com, which you can go to and get great videos that are helpful. She's written 9 different books, several on these topics, and then also some fiction books. And she's fascinating, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. So we were talking about the differences between men and women, and we got up to number 6. So number 1 was why we communicate. 2 was how we communicate. 3 is what we communicate about. 4 is how directly we communicate. 5 is what drives us. 6 is how we focus. And 7 is really quite interesting. It's how we express love. How do we express love that's so different between men and women, Rebecca?
For women, it's more about connection. And for men, so if you're thinking love languages, for men, it's usually their primary love language is acts of service. So they'll do things for you to let you know that they love you, but they may not gush. They may not be constantly, telling you how much they love you, or might not be as touchy-feely unless it's leading to a specific goal. But
we're goal-oriented.
Goal-oriented, exactly. And it's so funny because lots of times when, sex stops happening, women will say, I really miss the cuddles and the hand holding and the kissing, but I can't do that because then he'll think that, he thinks, I mean business. And if I'm not willing to go there, then I will forego that, which is kind of sad. And then you're getting disconnected. So the way we love and the way we, even sexually speaking, women will need to connect in order to have sex. Men will have sex to connect. And it's not just,
Hold it, back up. Say that again, please. That's interesting.
Women need to connect in order to be able to enjoy sex, and men, they use sex to connect. So lots of times men get a bad rap that, oh, he's a horn dog. It's just about the sex. It's rarely just about the sex. He's looking for connection. And that's how he gets his connection, because men don't hug each other. Women will just hug about anybody. Hey, how you doing? How's it going? So they get a lot of touch. They get a lot of affirmation. But a man is trained not to ask for that. So the place where he can just drop everything and just relax and be playful and be loving and connect and get touch is through sex. So not to assume that it's just about the sex. It's rarely just about the sex. It's about so much more for a guy.
It's about the connection.
It's about the connection. Yeah. Validation, affection.
How is sex about validation?
If you've had a bad day, you want me. At the end of the day, you want me in a world where, we feel like nobody to everybody. I'm somebody to this person. I'm everything to this person. And, if in a traditional sexual way, the woman is receiving you, she's allowing you to come in. And this intimate act could, produce a child, could lead to progeny. So it's a very, women have greater stock in that event. And if she's inviting you into her body, you're special. It's validating.
So do you think that sex is more important to females than it is to men? Like the act is a more impactful act?
For the most part, it's important to both, but in very different ways. But it does have a higher impact. And what's interesting is it's more about the connection, how someone made us feel. So a guy might say, so-and-so was really hot in bed. And the woman might say, I'll never forget so-and-so. He made me feel so good. And I've actually had people who said, the person has hurt me repeatedly, but when it's good, it's really good. They make me feel good. And what's interesting is as we get older, we're talking about the geriatric population, a lot of women end up with women, partly because there's less men around, but also because it's about, are you there for me? Will you show up when I need you? Will you have my back? And they feel that women are more nurturing. They feel that the woman cares for me, even though the guy may care for her. So a lot of females end up being with females later on in life.
You're saying that a lot of females that are straight during their adulthood become lesbian and later on in life? They
can partner with a female.
Really? I've never heard that before. That's fascinating.
Yeah, they can partner with a female. I know quite a few people where it's switched over. They're partnered with a female. Now, what exactly that looks like, it's one of those things people don't really necessarily talk about it, but maybe that's a doctoral thesis topic for the future.
Oh my God, sounds fascinating. Number 8 is how we deal with our problems. How do men and women deal with problems differently?
Women feel much better talking about their problems. Men rarely feel good talking about their problems. They will only talk about their problems for the most part if they need your help. And this is why what we talked about earlier, if a woman is talking about her problems, guys thinks, okay, you come to me.
She wants my advice. She wants my action.
What's my advice? What's my
goal-oriented?
Exactly. And, but women will just, when they don't feel good, they talk about the problem, they get it off their chest, they vent it, they feel really, really good. And when women talk to women, if you have a headache, I have a brain tumor, so I totally empathize with you. I'm not saying that there's that level of exaggeration, but it's like, yes, it's happened to me too. And they're willing to open up as a way of bonding. But guys will rarely talk about it. It's more of a joke than an actual story. But how it goes is this guy's had a really rough day. He comes home, he's very quiet, he's into himself, he's trying to problem solve in his head. He's not very communicative. His wife is trying to kind of communicate with him. Are you okay? What's going on? How are you feeling? This and that. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So then at the end of the night, she's like, okay, I'm losing this guy. So let's try sex. She has sex with him. And next day she calls up her girlfriend. She says, I think something's going on because he was so disconnected. He wouldn't talk to me. I hope he doesn't have someone else. But hey, he was fine when I offered sex. He'll tell his friend, lousy day at work, but got laid. See the direct and indirect?
So what's the lesson there? Is that even if your boyfriend or husband's in a bad mood, you should still go to bed with him?
Spoken like a lovely male.
But the next day he'll brag to his buddies when they got laid.
Makeup sex. It's fantastic. It's amazing.
You didn't hear that from me, but you know what? It is.
And speaking of which, I always say that if you're upset, if anything, that's the time you should try and have sex. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because when you have sex, you release oxytocin, and that's the bonding and monogamy hormone. So then especially you need to have sex.
I hadn't heard that before. I'd heard that it's the bonding, but it's the monogamy hormone. Explain that.
Yes. So that's why a lot of therapists refer to it as the stay versus stray hormone. So basically in the animal kingdom, all the animals like I think it's marmosets, cobras, and various other animals who are monogamous, the only thing they have in common is they have high levels of oxytocin. And even in humans, those who show high levels of oxytocin. And here's an interesting thing. When we make love, oxytocin lasts in our bloodstream for 3 to 4 days, max 4 days. So what happens is some people, males and females, because females love sex every bit as much as men do, just as much men love to connect and love and all that. At about the 3.5 day mark, some people actually can get grumpy or irritable or start to feel a disconnect. And they need that rush, that drug to bond again. So there's no such thing as a magical number for how often the two of you navigate, negotiate you want. But from a biological perspective, that explains why for majority of couples, it's a couple of times a week.
Really? That's interesting. So oxytocin. Beg pardon?
Hump day and weekend.
Hump day and weekend. Okay. So you say that oxytocin lasts for 3 or 4 days. What about dopamine? How long does that last?
Dopamine, it depends. Dopamine is a very tricky business. And, we talked last week about sex addiction and dopamine being the reward hormone and whatnot. With that, dopamine can, in fact, go even into dopamine fatigue. So if you're going for that dopamine fix constantly, after a while, the brain kind of quits. It says, okay, I can't keep up with you. And you can go into dopamine fatigue. But the half-life, I don't want to quote because I'm not quite certain, but it's definitely not as long as with oxytocin. It's shorter lived. That's why we need the fix again and again and again.
And do men and females, men and women have the same amount of oxytocin and dopamine, or do men have more dopamine and females have more oxytocin?
It depends on what's going on. Oxytocin is very similar. If anything, men, I believe, have a bit more because it mellows you out. And the evolutionary speaking, the advantage was you don't have sex and take off. You fall asleep. So ladies, if the guy falls asleep,
that's good.
Fall asleep so you can bond. You can have that post play. So it kind of, a woman may be energetic. She's like, yes, we're intimate, we're feeling good, we're very close. And now she's connecting and all that. And she's feeling very good that they bonded, they took the time to be with each other, and he may be asleep.
So if the man falls asleep, that's actually a good sign.
It's a good sign. He's sticking around.
He's comfortable.
It's funny. One time when I was emceeing, believe it or not, a fake orgasm contest at the Everything to Do with Sex show, there were all these.
Hold it. You were at a fake orgasm
No.
show?
I wasn't at a fake orgasm party. Everything to do with sex show. I think it was in the Sky Dome at the time. So we were doing a fake orgasm contest, and so it was like people went up on stage and they pretended. It was mostly auditory, nothing else, and so people were doing that. And I wanted everyone to simultaneously. I wanted us to go to Ripley's or something that so many people won't simultaneously. But the cutest thing was the person who won. Women were trying so hard to be very sexy. The person who won was a guy that came on stage. He made a couple of moves and then he pretended to be snoring. And the audience went wild and he got the big prize. I guess it was relatable.
Because that's what men do is they come quick and go to sleep.
Come and go real quick.
What are we up to? Number 9, how we feel about offers for help.
Well, a male will only want an offer for help if he specifically asks for it. Ditto for female, but female still likes the offer. So even though she may not want him to help or his opinion, she would love for him to say, she'll feel cared for if he says, I'm here if you need me. How can I help? That feels really good. The person knows that you have my back, but we don't want your opinion in that moment unless we ask for it. Does that make sense? There's a subtle difference, but
so they want to be heard. They want to vent. They want offers to help, but they don't want what, a lecture or something like this. And men don't want anything. They just want to deal with it themselves.
Yeah, because often a man will misinterpret if you just kind of jump in and you give unsolicited advice. He's going to think you don't trust me to be able to handle it myself. You're being critical because you don't think what I should do. You are ganging up on me. You see the other person's side because heaven forbid if you say, you might want to try to be a little bit gentler with this person and you're on the guy's side, but he might think, okay, so you're defending the other side. So it just, you feel attacked in that mode. Our default settings are love and war. Actually, war is the default setting. So, is this friend or foe, etc. So when we bring love into the picture, that's when things get warm and fuzzy. But if you're not bringing love into the picture, we're just saying, maybe, you can go gentler with your boss or whatever. The war mode comes on and then it's on and you're wondering.
We're chatting tonight with Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt, who is a clinical sexologist, a psychotherapist, an author of 9 different books. And we're having a fascinating conversation about the differences between men and women. She's got 10 differences that we've talked about, 9 of them, and we got 1 more to go. We're going to take a final break for some messages and come back with number 10, the 10th reason why men and women think differently. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having a lot of fun being educated tonight about all the mistakes I've made in my past because I didn't understand that men are from Mars and women are from Venus or whatever that book is. But this is actually even better than that book because Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt, who is a clinical sexologist, a registered psychotherapist, an addiction therapist, a TV host, an author of 9 different books, is telling us a little bit about what the differences are between men and women. And she says that the male and female brain are constructed very differently. They lead to various gender differences, and that we need to understand these differences if we're going to address each other. It's like we actually speak 2 different languages, which is a fascinating analogy. And the 10 are, number 1, why we communicate, how we communicate, what we communicate about, how directly we communicate, what drives us, how we focus, how we express love, how we deal with our problems, how we feel about offers for help. And then number 10, and I really think this is true, how we handle our mistakes. So, Rebecca, how do men and women handle the mistakes that they make differently?
Well, women tend to over apologize, whether they're at fault or their partner's at fault, because they don't like that discomfort, that tension, something that could be leading to a confrontation. Because remember, they're process oriented. So they want to kind of keep things on the DL, not let things get too out of hand. Whereas men don't apologize nearly enough, because to a male, that's a sign that I've somehow failed. Because a male sees an apology as I've let you down, I have failed. And anger is a secondary emotion to feeling sad, hurt, guilt, shame, et cetera, particularly for the males, for the male brain, because this is more on how, this is more nurture than it is nature, because boys from yay high, they're discouraged from showing their feelings. So the only feeling that a male is
have a backbone, stand up, be a man.
There you go. Yeah, have a backbone. So the only feeling they're allowed is anger, and it allows them to mask the other feelings. So there've been times, this time boyfriend, at one point a boyfriend, I'm thinking, why are you getting mad at me? And then I had to go ding, 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 because, anger is a secondary emotion, and he was feeling horrible for letting me down. But, he stood his ground, because it's an admission of guilt. It's an admission of weakness. It's an admission of failure. And as a society, we don't allow men to fail. We don't allow men to make mistakes. And it's really sad, because we all make mistakes, but we don't allow men to do that. Brene Brown was saying that she was at a book signing, and a fellow said, he came up to her and he said, my wife and daughters, and I'm not saying, oh, everyone's like that. He says, they'd rather see me die on the horse than watch me fall off the horse. And it was kind of tragic, extreme example, of course, but we don't give guys the space to be flawed, which is very, very sad. And so guys have to be on all the time, and it's very difficult for them to admit when they've done something wrong, and they might tend to hide it and cover it up because there's shame, there's embarrassment. It doesn't feel good because they're not taught that this is okay and how to deal with it. So that's a biggie, and I encourage females not to personalize some of the stuff. That was one of the reasons I was excited about doing this topic with you, is so we don't personalize. We say, okay, he's being a guy, she's being a female. That's what we do.
This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for telling us about these differences. And you think that some of them are just genetic, that it's just from our past, that men were the hunter gatherers and the females were the people that tended the farm and I guess took care of the children and ended up being the caregiver. But I guess some of it's got to be socialized over time as well. So nurture has got to play a role as well as nature. You do a lot of couple counseling, I understand. Do you think that couples need to understand these differences so that they can understand each other, or do you tell them about these, or do you get them to read a book, or how do you make sure that couples understand these differences?
Absolutely. They need to understand that. And they have that aha moment, the proverbial aha moment in therapy. They'll say, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense now. It's like you're talking about us. It makes so much sense. It doesn't matter what their background is. They'll invariably say, oh my gosh, this sounds like you're talking about us. So I'll give them a handout, and I can certainly give you a little thing if you want to put it up somewhere. And also have a couple of video clips on YouTube. And I think I might even have it on my, definitely on my YouTube channel. So it just kind of explains it. And there's some cute little skits that also explain. People say, I really laughed because that sounds like me and my partner.
Well, if you've got a link to something, I'll share it with the show. If you want to send it to me. So your past boyfriend is now your husband, I understand. Do you think that the two of you understand the differences? Does he understand the differences?
Not as much as I would like him to, because I can't wear my therapist hat when I'm in a relationship. I just can't. It would not be cool. But I understand. So
you understand them.
The onus is on me.
You must get very frustrated when you're telling him any therapist kind of comment as you're fighting or arguing or having an issue or a problem. And you say, it's just because you're too focused and goal oriented.
It's like what is said cannot be unsaid. Be calm, be mindful. Don't let there be any damage. It's better not to have damage than to do damage control afterwards. We're really loving people. We really get along well.
Well, that's wonderful. So this is interesting. Be calm. What is said can't be unsaid. So does that mean that you don't deal with problems?
So yes, no, you have to deal with problems. Absolutely. But it's how we fight. All couples fight. Dr. Gottman, he talks about there's no differences in the number of fights, but the masters know how to fight, and the disasters, they do a horrible job. They bring in what's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: so defensiveness, stonewalling, criticism, and contempt. If that's there, there's a 97% chance that the relationship is not going to make it.
Oh, the 4 horsemen. We're going to have another show talking about that. Fantastic. But we're out of time for tonight. That's too bad. Dr. Rebecca Rosenblatt, a clinical sexologist and psychologist. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If people want to hear more about you and about your thinking and writing on this, what's the best way to connect with you?
They can just go to talkwithrebecca.com. And there's also lots of stuff on YouTube. So it's just youtube.com/C/Rebecca TV. And there's lots of educational clips there as well.
Thank you so much. Telling us about the 10 differences between how men and women vary in their thinking, their action, the way they deal with problems, goal-oriented versus process-oriented, how they deal with each other. And I do think that if we understand that, we'll get along a lot better. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everyone.